Good afternoon and welcome. 46 years ago, I know that's hard to believe, but it's true. 46 years ago, Don Jacobs hired me. Before he was dean, before it was Kellogg, I was a staff person to Professor Jacobs in the finance department. From the beginning and through all those years, he gave me the gifts of opportunity, trust, and support. And I know there are many of you here today that feel that same way. We're here today to celebrate his life and legacy, and who to start out more appropriately than his daughter, Annie.
Lisa, David, and I are always asked what kind of parent our dad was. Was he tough? Was he a big disciplinarian? I think people expected us to say, yeah, he was tough. In actuality, he was a total pushover. We usually only had to ask twice if we wanted something, and on the rare occasion that didn't work, he'd say, okay, give me your best shot. If he liked our argument, off we went to whatever scheme we'd cooked up. The only condition was we had to come back when we heard his signature ear-piercing whistle. The Don Jacobs we knew was a gentleman, warm, protective, fiercely loyal, sometimes to a fault, and a fantastic dancer, to everything except Frank Sinatra, who he called not so much singing as talking off key. Everyone got that great big smile. The worst thing he ever said about someone was that they were a yo-yo. We knew that with every story Dad told, there may be a lot of exaggeration. We took many of his stories with a grain of salt and an eye roll. But if we heard the phrase, the fact of the matter is, we knew we better sit down because this was going to take a while. Dad had a unique combination of grit and warmth that he acquired growing up on the west side of Chicago. During the day, he roamed the neighborhood with his band of friends that united around him. My aunts referred to him and his friends as a bunch of bums. He earned the nickname Ducky after Donald Duck and continued to use nicknames affectionately. A select few were called Kiddo and would get hiya kiddo as hello and be well kiddo as goodbye. David was Dove, I was Annie Bell, and poor Lisa got stuck with Lisa Pizza. He referred to himself as dear old dad. It's your dear old dad, call me, or it's your dear old dad, let's have dinner before I forget what you look like. We called him Dean Don, Dad, or Big Guy. He traveled a lot, but I don't think we noticed because he stayed in touch nearly every day. Early on, it was speedy conversations with his MCI card because he hated paying for the minutes. And later, it was Skype and FaceTime. Although he never really mastered FaceTime, we usually ended up talking to his nose or the ceiling. It didn't matter. That pig personality came through just fine, and we could feel that huge smile of his even if we couldn't see it. He was home for every important occasion, from piano recitals to prom. On prom night, he gave me an impromptu dance lesson, and after we twirled around the living room a few times, his inner west side came out, and he showed me how to pull someone's thumb back in a painful way, in case my date's hands ventured somewhere I didn't want them to go. He gave us his love for travel and taught us to pack light, always keep your passport up to date, and just in case. His travel habits were legendary. He could sleep all the way through a 15-hour flight, and he never experienced jet lag. When he got in the car, he drove a lot like Mr. Magoo. We would spend summers zooming around Europe in the car and head off to the Bergenstock with his dear friends, Horst Albach and Pierre Tabatoni. If any of us had a school break that coincided with his travels, we were sometimes invited along. If he was at the Bergenstock, he'd hand me a plane ticket and say, take the plane to the train to the boat to the funicular. I'll meet you at the top. And he was always there, except for the one time he got distracted by a stray cat and was trying to find a participant to adopt it. Another question I've had since I started at Kellogg was, what's it like to work at Kellogg as Don Jacobs' daughter? Working at Kellogg was an accident for me, just like Dad's deanship was for him. Kellogg was looking for a web person, and I thought I could help out for a year or so. Here I am 14 years later. That's the thing about Kellogg. Dad was right. It's a family. When I started, I told him, listen, I'm going to work at the Allen Center, but I'm going to fly under the radar. I'm going to go by Kolb rather than Jacobs. In response, I got what we kids referred to as the blink. And then he gave me a few pieces of advice. Always be available, value the team, and if you need to know something, ask Carol Cahill. If you need to get something done, ask Liz Livingston. I'm still doing that. Then the negotiations started. I agreed not to pretend I didn't know him when we saw each other in the buffet line. And he agreed not to call me Annie in front of any of my colleagues. And he mostly behaved. But I could never get him to stop calling the exec ed front desk if he couldn't reach me. I can't count how many times a patient, Chris Payne or Allison Wilder would appear at my office door saying, I have Don Jacobs on hold. Right about the time, I'd get a text from his beloved assistant, Tara Davis, that said, sorry, I tried to stop him. I had the privilege of working on a number of gym classes with Dad. That's not phys ed, that's a class. We took students to Korea, Hong Kong, China, and Japan. The trips always took place in March, but started in November. The emails and phone calls would start pouring in. Where's Don? When's he going to be here? When can I see him? What's his schedule? Hiroko Osaka, my Japanese sister, as Dad lovingly called her, would meet us at the hotel in Tokyo, and together we would navigate the network of friends and alums who Dad called family. Over the years, they became my family too. You haven't lived until you've seen Mr. Naito, Professor Okamura, and Dad do a rip-roaring karaoke rendition of Take Me Home Country Roads. During the class sessions, I got to see him in action. He would help a team gel by asking a few key questions rather than stand in front lecturing. He told me that good leadership is sometimes a gentle push from behind rather than a strong tug from the front. Excuse me. While we were in country, I got to experience the amazing alumni network in action. People came out of the woodwork everywhere we went to greet Dad. Kellogg alums would flag him down in airports to tell him what an impact he had on them and to thank him for his mentorship. All along, Dad always thought he was just having conversations with people. He never called what he did mentoring. He found people so interesting and loved talking to them and loved talking out problems. Even with me, whether I was thinking about how to convince my husband to get a dog or how to finish a project on time, he'd say, listen, Belle, I can keep telling you what I think, but you'll figure it out. And at the end of the day, you'll always have your dear old Dad. What did I learn from having such a wise man as my father? He always said he was incredibly lucky, and I know that to be true. He did what he loved with people he loved, helping others pursue what they loved. As much as everyone believes he impacted them, you all impacted him by being part of our Kellogg family. We'll miss you, big guy.